So Dale, I've got a question for you. So would you consider yourself a coachable hockey player?
I believe the answer to that would be yes. I'd try to be pretty open to feedback, acceptive of criticism of all types, trying to grow. So, yeah, I think if you asked any of my coaches growing up, I think they'd say I was coachable, yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, I know as a youth hockey coach and even someone who manages employees, when someone's not coachable, it's the most challenging thing. Hi, I'm Scott Schwertly.
And I'm Dameron.
And we are mental performance coaches at GritBase. And at GritBase, we create customized mental performance strategies to help hockey players just like you become more confident, calm, and mentally tough so they can succeed on and off the ice. And we're also the hosts of this podcast, Hockey Combat Mindset, which is all about helping you win the war in your mind so you can become a stronger and more capable hockey player. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Welcome indeed to episode number 8. And I'm extremely excited to get into this episode. Also extremely excited because here pretty soon, it's about to be August. And we are getting through the dog days of summer and getting close to that start of, the glorious time of the year, the start of the NHL season coming up.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I keep seeing the countdowns. I think the last one I saw was since obviously I'm a Preds fan, so I saw the Luke Evangelista one where it's 77 days.
77 days, yeah.
So I know we're getting close, which is, I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, if you're like me, every time everyone gets excited when, the NHL schedule comes out for the next year. It's usually like around the, Stanley Cup final time. Man, I get excited when I see the preseason schedule come out because I'm like, oh, man, all right, September, it's not that far away. And, of course, everything that comes with fall, the changing leaves, the color, the coolness in the air, all the sports coming back, it's just fantastic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this is actually the first season that Brittany and I have decided to get season tickets, or at least not full season tickets, but partial season tickets. And this is, again, as a Preds fan, this is definitely the year that I'm super content, happy to have them with Stamkos joining and obviously many others like Brady Shea and so forth. So,
yeah.
And Marshy. And yeah, it's going to be good.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I don't know. August does seem to drag on, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But great thing is we have this podcast, and hopefully everyone's tuning in every single week, listening to us, offering some great feedback on how to, really make yourself more mentally tough. Speaking of being mentally tough, you just traveled with the family last week, right?
Yes. So we actually just got back from spending some time with my wife's family in Kentucky. So that's it's always fun to get away, but I always feel like we have to recover, just like most people,
Yeah.
from your time away. So it was nice to actually sleep in our own bed last night, and because usually when we're there, they have a queen size bed, and I think we've been spoiled with having a king size bed. So
it happens.
It's nice having that extra space. And
Yep. It definitely does.
Yeah.
And everyone's in their own beds and, everything like that. So it's just more relaxing. So that's good.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been a great week for us too. We didn't travel this last week, thank goodness, but actually we were kidless the last week because they were out of school. So they stayed with grandparents. And they're going to do it again this coming week too. So
Nice.
We're going to be kind of spoiled having
Yeah,
the house to ourselves, just us and the dog. It's going to be kind of crazy. But either way, super exciting times. But we do have a great topic to get into today. We are going to go over whether or not you are a coachable hockey player.
Oh yeah, I'm super pumped. I love this episode because it's one of these topics that most people tend to not think about. I mean, if you're tuning into a hockey podcast, maybe you're wanting to learn more about how to increase enhance your skills, or in this case, maybe improve your mindset. But taking this sort of time to self-reflect and almost sort of self-criticize, or at least just become more self-aware. It's one of these topics I think that often just gets sort of neglected or ignored. So excited to sort of get everybody thinking introspectively about themselves and maybe areas that they can improve in.
Yeah, definitely. So are you a coachable hockey player? Great question, and we're going to get into that on the other side. So if you ask any player that's playing any sport, rather, but in our case, more so ice hockey, Are you a coachable hockey player? I think everyone's going to say yes. I feel like, especially it's like one of those interview questions where you're like, do you think you are open and like to feedback? Oh, heck yeah, of course I am,
Yeah.
But like when push comes to shove, what makes a coachable hockey player?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a ton of variables that we're going to unpack today, where, again, I think you need to have that sort of heightened sense of self-awareness to really truly be coachable. But I agree with you. And I don't want to like give it all away right here up at the front, but yeah, I think what you just stated there, I think most people tend to kind of naturally have that as their go-to answer as a yes.
Yeah.
But I think if they were to maybe get outside perspective or feedback,
yes,
they'd probably get some disagreement with that.
I just feel like even if you were to take this to the business world and someone was sitting in a job interview and they asked the person across the table, are you coachable?
Yeah.
Who's going to say no?
Right.
Right. I mean,
like, are you a hard worker? Oh, yeah, of course. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's more so about when push comes to shove, are you coachable at that point? Right. Or when the times get tough, which we've talked about a lot in this podcast, how do you react when things get hard?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where a lot of this stuff kind of hopefully comes into play. Maybe, like you said, I think before the break, being more self-aware, self-receptive to, hey, things aren't working out with the way I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I might need help from somebody.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point because it's sort of like you really do see someone's true character, as you mentioned, when things get tough. And so, yeah, right here on the surface level, it might sound like, yeah, I'm coachable, but let's say you're having a losing season or the last 6 games you've been scoreless. Are you really coachable in those moments? Are you really going to be ready for or sort of receptive for feedback? I don't know. Only you can make that call as a listener. But what we really want to hammer home here today is that being receptive to feedback, being a coachable hockey player, it does require some specific skill sets, some specific almost, not say, I don't want to say personality traits, but it's probably more specific skill sets or things that you have to be intentional about moving forward to make sure you are as coachable as you possibly can be. Because at the end of the day, if you're coachable, right, it's going to be good for your coach. It's going to be for your team. It's good for everyone.
It's good for your career because, as we'll see a lot in hockey, the players that you see at the top level that make those top lines tend to be the more coachable hockey players.
Oh, yeah,
unless
absolutely.
they just naturally have like a gift that outweighs other blind spots. But I mean, we see it all the time. The players that are high draft picks that kind of start falling through the lineup, they start falling down into the minor leagues. There's no knock on any of that, but maybe some of the times is that they're not open to change. They're not open and receptive to growing. And if the coach doesn't see that, he's going to be the one that kind of determines how much time you're getting to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm thinking about my own personal story, and I'm kind of guilty of that to a certain extent where I felt like I could do things on my own and that I knew the best, things for myself and what I needed to do. And I didn't need outside help or assistance. And, to be honest, I feel like there's a little bit of an ego involved in those moments. Not to pat myself back now, because the story I'm going to share with you is one of me being coachable. But it took some time for me to get to that point. So just quickly, just kind of to highlight the story that I wanted to share with you guys is, as I've made very clear on this podcast, in my former life, I was a triathlete. And so before being a triathlete, I was a competitive runner. And so by the time I started getting into the world of triathlon, I believe I had 10 marathons under my belt and probably maybe 17 or 18 half marathons under my belt. So when I made the decision in my head that I wanted to pursue triathlon, I wanted to do the thing. I wanted to do the Ironman. I wanted the full experience. And so knowing that I had this racing background, I had this endurance background, I thought, okay, I could do an Ironman. I'm just adding swimming and biking to it. Done my fair share of marathons. I've got this, no problem at all. And so I picked a training program, started investing the time and effort and the energy into it. And lo and behold, I failed. Like I failed big time. I remember inviting my family and friends out to St. George, Utah. I live in Nashville, so obviously we had to get on a plane to go to that destination. And I got pulled off the bike course. I was so winded, so out of energy. I don't want to make excuses, but there were swells that day in the lake. The conditions were awful, super windy. Anyway,
so real quick, I don't want to focus on the negative, but
yeah,
it was the bike course. So you had already swam.
Yeah, so I've already
then,
at that point I've already done the 2+ miles of swimming,
Yeah.
and I think by maybe mile 80 of 112, my race time was too slow to make the cutoff.
That's what it was. Okay.
And so they pulled me off along with probably like 25 other athletes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so
it's like you probably wouldn't have been able to finish before like daylight.
Yeah, because you have a 17-hour cutoff, and based on where I was at on the race course, I would have been beyond 17 hours.
Gotcha.
At that point. So I think on my
side note, real quick.
Yeah.
How beautiful is St. George, Utah?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
I know you probably doesn't bring back great memories.
Oh, I wish I could go back there and just actually do like a vacation. I remember going up there as a kid. I grew up in Southern California. My parents had an RV, so we would go up to Utah, going to St. George and then Bryce Canyon, Zion, all those places. Obviously I was there for an Ironman. I didn't get to really focus and enjoy it that much, but I'd love to go back again.
I'm picturing the scenery of it
while
you're in the middle of the race. Now, granted, I know it wasn't a great memory.
Yeah.
And you're probably repressed it until bringing it back up in this episode.
PTSD over
here.
Yeah,
my bad. I'm going to make you dive into it and really like delve. Either way, I was kind of living vicariously through you just listening to the story. Sorry about your pain, but it sounded beautiful. But anyway, I'll let you get back to, so you coaching.
Yeah.
Right?
So I had my very first DNF. So again, if you think about all the marathons, half marathons, 10Ks, 5Ks, 9-mile runs, all these different things I've done, like up to that point, I never experienced a DNF. Like I'd never been forced to exit a course. I've never quit. I've never given up. But in this case, I was forced to quit. And that was such a emotional blow on me. In fact, I remember getting back to the hotel, and my dad was there. And, again, I felt guilty because at the time we're living in California. So they flew out to Utah to see this. And I got back and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna sign up for another one, and this time I'm also gonna hire a coach. And he's like, you're gonna do what?
How about you just right when you came back?
Yeah, right when I got back to the hotel room. I mean, like I was so disenchanted. I mean, again, it was an emotional blow, but I was able to sort of bounce back. But I remember like him doubting me, and he was like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Like, this is a huge investment of time. Like, are you sure?" And like.
And I can imagine as a family member watching you get pulled.
Yeah.
Like he knew how much time you put into this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm standing up for your dad here. But he knew how much time you put into this, and then it's hard for a parent to watch their kids fail, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard for you to live it, but it's also hard for you to watch as a parent your child go through it, and so he was trying to protect you.
Oh yeah. No, looking back, I definitely know that his motive was there to shield me and to protect me. And I guess in this moment I was just stubborn. But yeah, so I made it a mission that I ended up picking another race.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to target Louisville, Kentucky, which was going to happen in about, about maybe 12 weeks from that date. So immediately when I got home, one of the very first things I did is I actually reached out to a triathlon coach. In fact, his name's Andrew Dollar, still friends with him to this day. Reached out to him. I think within a day or two, we were having lunch downtown Nashville. He rolled out a game plan for me. He told me what we could do. And then I think just a few days after that, he was at the pool analyzing my swim stroke. And he was uploading workouts to Training Peaks, which is what a software program that triathletes use or endurance athletes use. So all of a sudden my workouts are getting uploaded, and here he is starting to analyze and monitor, provide feedback, and get me on a custom program built just for me. And man, it was absolutely game changing. And so long story short, 12 weeks, 11 weeks, however long it was, fast forward, and I was able to cross the line at my second Ironman attempt in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was such an amazing experience. And to this day, like I would have not been able to do that if I did not hire a coach. And so, speaking from experience, having a one-on-one coach like that, man, I mean, I'm forever grateful, and I have learned the value of having a coach in your life. And it helped me become, which is the theme of this topic, it helped me become more coachable. Like I know what is needed, and how you need to be as an athlete, and sort of having that humble pie or eating that humble pie to recalibrate, readjust, and then ultimately grow from it.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because it kind of gets us into our first point, which is, these are tips to become a more coachable player, right? The first one being listen more than you speak. The gentleman that helped you out, Andrew Dollar, you had said that he was a triathlete, right?
Oh, yeah.
How many did he completed at that time? Do you know?
Oh, I know like several.
Yeah,
he had several
lot.
under his belt. Yes.
So you listened to him because he had the track record.
Yeah.
No pun intended. But like he had finished it before.
Yeah.
You hadn't.
Yeah.
So you knew right away, I need to listen to this guy.
Yeah. I mean, he was sort of like my Yoda, and I was sort of like Luke Skywalker, where he could see my potential, but I just haven't tapped into it yet.
Right.
And he was there. He's been there, done that.
Right.
And
your training was probably really like you probably trained very well, but you didn't train like the extra 10% that needed to get you over those swells that you mentioned about, or something that out of your control, like we talked about before.
Exactly.
And so you listened to him, you paid attention to him. Now the problem is not every coach you're going to get in life is going to be necessarily more, not have like wards and, have like a ton of like, laurels to rest on.
Yeah.
Like some coaches just have the wisdom and the mindset to get you across the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
And either way, whether you have someone who's been there, done that, or someone who just has maybe a radical mindset or a new way to like look at things, you got to listen more than you speak. You can't come in there thinking that you're the loudest person in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's something where you just, at the end of the day, you've got to trust, and this even goes for parents out there, right? Like if your kid is playing youth hockey, you've got to trust that coach has more experience than you, that they've been around the block, that they know what they're doing, and whether they have all those accolades or medals, maybe they do, maybe they don't. They're in that position for a reason. Obviously, somebody trusted to put them there.
Right.
So parents need to listen. The athletes need to listen. I know for me, even as like again, going back to my former life as a business person, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people don't practice, let's say, active listening. Mm-hmm. So like I can remember, like, let's say I'm having a one-on-one with an employee and I'm like, okay, game plan for this week. You've got to do, or you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then they just sit there and either nod or like they go, okay, sure.
Got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I want, as your manager, or in this case, as your coach, like I want to hear you say back to me, okay, so I'm hearing from you, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, or we're going to do it this way. And it's like, yes. And it's the same thing. Like even like when I'm coaching project managers, if a client says to us, I want to use the color red and I want to see it scattered across slide 9, 12, and 17. I want my project manager to say, so I'm hearing that you want us to use the color red and you want us to put it on slide, whatever I just said there, slide 7, 9, or whatever, 17. Like that to me is active listening. And that goes a long way because, it shows that that everybody's listening, mm-hmm. and that things are being heard.
Yes.
I think is probably the biggest theme there. And so if you take this into like a coaching environment, like if your coach says, hey, tonight I need you to visualize how you're going to play the corners for tomorrow night's game, you as an athlete, if you want to be coachable, like if you truly want to define yourself as coachable, then you need to respond back and say, okay, coach, so I plan to visualize this evening how I can play the corners. Let your coach know mm-hmm. that you heard exactly what they said and that you're going to do it. Because if you just nod and smile or don't say anything at all, like you're not coachable. Like that is not, you lack a coachable trait, and that is listening again more than you speak.
I also say it would play very big parts into how the next day could play out, or how the game would play out, right? So let's say the coach, we'll go back to that example. Coach says, I need you to visualize how you're going to play the corners.
Mm-hmm.
If you just said, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll do it.
It's like, do you really got it?
Well, yeah. And then let's say you don't do it the next game, but you did hear him.
Yeah.
Well, the coach doesn't know if you even like registered anything that he told you.
Yeah.
However, if you had told him, yes, I plan to visualize this evening how I play the corners tomorrow. Now, if you mess up, he's going to give you a little bit more, he or she will give you a little bit more leeway, mm-hmm. right? Because they're going to say, well, okay, I think you just need more practice at it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, were you even listening?
Yeah, like, did you hear me yesterday
exactly.
when I said you that? Yeah.
And what is one of the more infuriating things in any avenue, a career, personal life, anything like that, when you tell someone or ask them to do something and they say yes and then it just doesn't happen, or the complete opposite happens and you're just like, where were you?
Yeah.
I swear you were right here in front of me.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought you received it, but apparently you didn't.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, but listen more than you speak. And this is honestly not just a coaching thing. This is the great thing in life, right?
Yeah.
In sales, I've had a lot of background in sales. The saying is, if you're speaking, you're losing.
Yeah.
So when you go into a sales call with anyone that, say someone you're meeting them for the first time, or if you've been there multiple times, you know, if you're going in and you're doing all the talking, you are losing at that point. People don't want to buy things from people that are just blabbermouths or think that they're know-it-alls or don't even give them a chance to speak, right? Yeah. This also goes back to when I was a police officer as well. One of my things that I feel like trait that I carried through when I was on the streets working was honestly listen to people. A lot of people that are in hard times, a lot of people that are struggling are really, most of their frustration comes to the fact that they feel like they are not heard.
Yeah.
And that could be from family, from parents, from friends, people they work with, well, whoever it may be, right? So a good trait, like it carries on throughout, is just listen. And when I was a police officer, I would do that all the time. They could be calling me whatever they want to call me, whatever. I'm going to let them get it off their chest. And maybe we'll poke a question in every now and then, but I'm going to be listening to them because a listening ear, they're going to tell you so much. I mean, and I'm not talking about just being a police officer and figuring out, you know, who's guilty and who's not, but like they're going to tell you more than maybe what just their words will tell you, right?
Yeah.
You're going to gain so much more about someone if you just listen.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying that, I'm talking this whole time. So I'm already feeling like I'm losing, but no, no, it's just a very important thing. And I love that we started out with that one.
Yeah. It's the whole reason, like, again, the classic, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? Like you're supposed to listen more than you actually talk. So yeah, if you can obviously embody this habit, sort of this approach to life, you're that much closer to being what we would consider, again, a coachable athlete or a coachable player. All right, well, so let's talk about number 2, which is similar but just a little bit different, and it's the whole idea that, again, if you want to continue down this path of being a coachable hockey player, you have to embrace a growth mindset. So, in other words, you've got to be willing to grow. It's exactly that. It's Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset back in the day. It's the classic, growth versus fixed mindset. So I know for some of you out there, this is probably an old concept. For some of you, you may be hearing about this for the first time. So I'll just kind of summarize this. But basically, as a human, you can sort of pursue 2 different pathways. 1, you could have a fixed mindset, or 2, you can have a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset, basically you feel like whatever is already in place, you're kind of stuck, right? Like there's this invisible ceiling and you really can't do anything. You can't change anything. You can't really poke at it to make things different. Where if you have a growth mindset, that ceiling is much higher and you feel like you have more control over your destiny, your future, that if you work a little bit harder, maybe if you acquire some new knowledge, if you learn a new skill set, like the sky's the limit, that there is opportunity for growth. There is opportunity for change. Well, it's that mindset that you need to have in order to be what we would again call a coachable hockey player.
It's the difference between being too rigid and being flexible.
Yeah.
If you think about like a piece of wood or a piece of concrete, it's rigid. You're not going to be able to push. If you push as much force on it as possible, it will not bend. It will break. And it's going to take a lot to break it. But a piece of rubber or piece of cotton, something like that, it's gonna have more give to it. You're gonna push into it. It's gonna like bend and be able to receive more weight at that time too, right? So it goes into making sure you're not too rigid as a hockey player, and like you said, that you're more open to, just being able to take in more, basically. This goes a lot with if you think back to hockey, a lot of players that start over in Europe have a hard transition when they come to the NHL. For all of us that follow hockey, if you're not used to following hockey, especially on the international stage, the ice rinks in Europe outside of North America are wider. They're significantly wider. And it's different for every single player. It kind of goes back to those corners, right? There's not a lot of play in the corners.
Yeah.
But it's different for every player, but especially defensemen and goalies. Goalies, more about the sight lines. It's a little bit off because they get used to like where the boards are located at from where their crease is located. But defensemen struggle with it too, because what happens when you shrink the rink down and you make it a little bit smaller? What happens to the game? It becomes more physical, right?
Yeah.
There's more people running into each other. It's tight knit corners. You can't escape with your speed as easily. So a couple defensemen that I wanted to highlight in this episode are, one of them is a Norris Trophy winning all-star defenseman. The other one is a stout defenseman in his own right that is continuing to get better and better every single season. But both started their careers off playing over in Europe in the Swedish Junior League. So the first one is Victor Hedman, who we all know plays for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He started in the Swedish Junior League with Modo Junior, and then he got drafted in 2008, 2009 season by the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is where he still is today. Now, Hedman had a hard time, like a lot of the defensemen do, like I said, a lot of defensemen do, coming over here and transitioning his game to the NHL game. Actually, when he came over, I don't even think he played. He's just 18 years old. He had a hard time getting into the lineup. But luckily for him, he was able to stay in Europe for a little bit longer, kind of learn how to improve his game, get more physical. And around that time in 2012, 2013, John Cooper, who was the AHL head coach for the Lightning's AHL team, took over the head coaching job for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it was at this time that Hedman really saw a jump in his career. And I've heard that Hedman is not super receptive of coaches. I think it was something that happened to him when he was in Europe, a coach he had when he was younger. He just didn't have a lot of trust for coaches. But Cooper was able to break that barrier with Hedman. Under his leadership, his game evolved substantially. His staff provided consistent guidance. They actually had development plans that help him kind of refine his defensive skills and his overall game. And in the same time, Hedman had a willingness to embrace this coaching, right? And it helped him grow as a player.
Yeah, I mean, that's where obviously the growth mindset is kicking in. But we actually need to dedicate an entire podcast just to John Cooper, because he's amazing. He is amazing, and I don't know if
he's won at every level, right?
Yeah, and when you study his background, I think he was a lawyer at one point, and I think his son was playing recreational hockey, and then so he decided to coach his high school team.
Sounds right. Yeah,
and then it wasn't even on the path to becoming an NHL coach. Like the fact he just did a whole 180, just an impressive background. But I mean, his superpower is his ability to motivate, incentivize, and to rally a team. In this case, Victor Hedman is, again, John Cooper deserves his own episode for us here. But no, I mean, that's a great example, as you already alluded to, of just a powerful growth mindset on Victor Hedman's part.
Yeah, so actually I was kind of wrong on what I said earlier, so I'm going to correct myself on this podcast. He actually went back to Sweden for only one more year after he was drafted, and then he did join the Lightning. However, in his first 3 seasons with the Lightning, he played a good number of games, 74, 79, 61 games each season. His plus minus each year, -3, 3, and then -9. Went back over, played in actually the KHL in the lockout shortened season of 2012-13. Saw a little bit of a jump, and then that's around the time that John Cooper comes into the Lightning. Here are his plus minus numbers from that point on: 1, 5, 12, 21, 32, 24, 20. So you see the consistent rise in his defensive play. Now, a lot of things can be said about plus minus and whether or not it's a valid statistic or not. But there is a lot to say that it is especially for defensemen, it seems to be a good value add of whether or not, are you on the ice when your team scores as opposed to when your team gets scored against, right? So, I mean, you saw the jump, and of course in the 2019-20 season and the 2020 to 2021 season, the Lightning walk away with 2 Stanley Cups, right?
Yeah.
And Hedman's a big part of that. So he becomes a leader in the locker room, and that would not have happened if he didn't build that trust and embrace that growth mindset that his coach put on him from the beginning.
Nice. No, that's a great example. And then I know the other one you mentioned, or we're going to mention, was Mattias Ekholm, right?
Yeah. So Mattias Ekholm, similar kind of story with him. He started out in the Swedish Junior League as well. But he did a lot more staying over in Europe even after he was drafted by the Nashville Predators. Barry Trotz was the head coach at the time. He couldn't get really a crack into the lineup. He tried. He went back and played in Europe for one season, came back, played for the Preds, played 2 games for him, went -1, no points, went back to Europe to play the rest of that season. But then he did what a lot of players will do too, especially defensemen and goalies. Came back and played for the Milwaukee Admirals of the AHL, again, North American ice, gets used to the rink, and played a significant part in that season, came back, played full-time for the Preds the next season with their new head coach, Peter Laviolette. He was a -8 that season, but since that point, 12, 14, 25, 27. Again, we're seeing a player embrace a growth mindset, embrace how to play on North American ice, really maybe click with the coach that he had at that time that really kind of either maybe also knew what he needed better just for that player. Not saying that one coach is better than another, but because of that, they were able to master their craft and get better. And unfortunately, Ekholm doesn't play for the Preds anymore. Now we saw him in the Stanley Cup final with the Edmonton Oilers this year. But I mean, he's a top defenseman in this league by far.
I mean, I've self-admitted Oilers fan here. So, I mean, I love that Bouchard Ekholm line. Like, I think they're one of the best lines.
They were a great pairing. One of the best pairings of definitely the postseason by far. Yeah.
So it's been fun to watch him sort of, almost get like a second birth here, which is great. Well, one thing I'd be I'd be remiss to not mention is kind of sort of a close cousin here of the growth mindset and fixed mindset is a psychology term, which is sort of this thing called the internal locus of control, the external locus of control. So kind of in comparison to the growth mindset versus fixed mindset, if you have a fixed mindset, that's sort of like having this external locus of control outlook on life where things that are happening to you are external and you have no control over them, where an internal locus of control mindset or approach to life is that, no, you have the power within to make things happen. You have the ability to change. You have the ability to grow. And so if you look at Victor Hedman, if you look at a Matthias Ekholm, they very much are embracing this internal locus of control where, no, I can change my future. I can change my destiny. I can work a little bit harder. I can adapt. I could, study film more. I could do whatever, but they were willing to change their game, and they've been able to grow and sort of evolve because of it.
Discover your hockey player type in just 3 minutes. Are you the tenacious bear or perhaps the agile cheetah? Introducing Primal Score, our free assessment to help you unleash your inner beast. It's time to take the limiter off your potential. Claim your edge by taking this fast and free assessment that's designed to help hockey players just like you achieve their full potential. Go to yourprimalscore.com to get your personalized results. Again, that's yourprimalscore.com.
All right, so number 3 is take ownership. And I love this one because I know a lot of you out there have probably watched this already. I'm late to the game on this. But on Netflix, there's a series called Quarterbacks. I just started watching that recently. I've heard a lot about it. And so I finally kind of tuned into it. And it's great that we're talking about taking ownership because I believe it was Peyton Manning at the start of the first episode mentions about the responsibility a quarterback in the sport of football carries, right? It's at the start of every play, the quarterback is the focus of everyone's attention at the start of the play, and rightfully so. And if things are going well for your team in the game, the quarterback has to be able to applaud his teammates and give credit to his teammates. Even if he was the one that made that amazing pass, they still had to catch it. He still had to hand it off to running back. The running back had to, make all the moves he could do and get as fast to break that hole, right? Whatever it may be. But at the same time, if things aren't going well, if he even threw a perfect pass, but it was dropped by his receiver, he has to be able to take ownership and take blame, even if it wasn't his fault, right? Because that's what a coachable player does. Mm-hmm. You don't put it on the shoulders of anyone else. It's only on you. Even if it's things out of your control, it's not a way to you're not going to grow by putting on other people.
Yeah.
And I know this is football, not hockey, but I can speak, I'm pretty sure with pretty much 100% confidence that if you're trying to be a quarterback in the sport of football and you're not coachable, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. It's interesting because it reminds me a lot of just my startup days. So when I created my first company 18 years ago, I was a one-man band, and so I was doing everything. I was doing sales, I was doing project management, I was even doing some low levels of design because I was actually creating a presentation design agency. But yeah, I was doing it all, marketing, you name it, I was doing. I was the face of the company, so if I closed training gigs, I was out there doing the keynote talks and the training gigs, et cetera. But I remember as I finally started to get the business to a profitable level and had the cash to be able to hire employees or subcontractors, I always looked at each person I brought on as sort of, because it was started as me. It was, ethos 3 is Scott is ethos 3. Mm-hmm. And so if I hired a designer, that was kind of like, okay, that's my arm. Or if I hired a project manager, okay, there's my leg or there's my head. And so each person, was an extension of me, from big body parts to arms and legs to eventually, as I got more employees, to like fingers and toes or whatever. And so everybody was just an extension of myself. And it's something that I carried through really to this day. So even whether it was year 5, year 10, year 15, if something went wrong, if a project exploded, a client's irate, a client's mad, and maybe we underdelivered or overpromised or underdelivered, which is really bad, where all of a sudden I'm being roped back into the conversation where now the CEO, the VP of sales, they want to talk to Scott because I'm the founder of the company or the, owner operator. The thing that I learned early on is because everybody's an extension of me, that also means everybody is a reflection of me, and it's a reflection of the brand that I've created. And it was a hard lesson, and I'm glad I got it sort of in those small doses. But what I've learned over the years is that the sooner that I can just take sort of the initiative and take the blame and take the ownership over, yeah, we screwed up. Yeah, we failed. Yes, we made a mistake. Because again, everything is a reflection of everybody else. It's that quarterback mindset that you're talking about there, Dale, that, again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. This has been years and years of lessons to get to that point. But I know that was a very, I guess, sort of an awakening for me, that the sooner I learned that lesson, I think the better off I was and the business was. And I was able to salvage relationships and keep things healthy because of that ability to say I'm sorry or I screwed up, and to, in this case, take ownership. Yeah.
It's great that you mentioned that too, because when I was in the police academy is very much like a boot camp, type mindset. They want to break you down, build you back up, in the right way or whatnot. And in doing so, I was actually proud and able to be the class leader of my academy class as well. And it didn't matter whether I had all my ducks in a row. When someone in my squad or in my class screwed up, guess who it was that also had to pay up for it? Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah.
And sometimes I had to be the only one that paid up for it, or their squad leader had to be the only one that paid up with it. For me, they didn't even have to, right? Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like you talked about getting your ducks in a row. It's a reflection on your own self, right? And if you can't take that ownership, guess who's going to be doing push-ups every single day, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a funny, different way to look at it. But like you said, with your company, with your early company, like if you kept saying, well, Johnny keeps messing up and he keeps, forgetting to charge the clicker, and so that's why we don't have a clicker every single time, right?
Yeah.
For the presentations. Well, okay, eventually, yeah, that is on Johnny, and that's something you might need to address with him, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, who are they going to look at as the face of the company?
Yeah.
And who can't get his pointer to work out, right, during the presentation? So you have to take ownership of it, and by doing so, you're opening yourself and your team up to being able to improve themselves. Because if you're not, you're never going to break out of that cycle, and mistakes are just going to continue to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's one of these golden gems about if you do, again, want to become more of a coachable player, athlete. Yeah, you've got to take ownership, and you've got to look at yourself first before you start looking at others. It's, like the Bible talks about, like, take the plank out of your own eye. Mm-hmm. First. Like, look internally, evaluate, what did you mess up? What could you have done better? Once you fully have done that analysis, then maybe you can start looking on the outside, but you really got to look at yourself first. And that goes back to this theme of taking ownership over who you are and what you're bringing to the table as an athlete.
Yep. And in doing so, it's going to really play well into the next part too, which is you have to be receptive to criticism. and we've kind of alluded to this already in this episode, but if you're not going to take ownership, you're not going to be ready to receive criticism at all. Because when someone tries to criticize you for either, something you've done wrong, or we're talking about constructive criticism here, right? You're not going to be open to receiving that in the right way if you're not able to take ownership. If you think that pass didn't connect with you and your teammate because your teammate always isn't ready to, collect it, and you never do anything to address that, then how are you going to feel when your coach comes at you and gets on you and berates you about never completing that pass? Well, you're not going to be open to it, right? You're going to be like, you're going to shut them down immediately and say, well, if my teammate, my winger over there would be able to, receive the pass, then I wouldn't have this problem, right? Maybe you need to go talk to him. Well, that doesn't show to a coach that you're open to being coachable at that point. Like that's showing that you're pretty shut off and you're pretty closed-minded to, maybe being open to what could be, repaired here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great example. And I know these two here about taking ownership and being receptive to criticism are really sort of really close cousins because they do kind of go hand in hand. And I think back to my, it's funny because I think back again to my triathlon days where one of the things that my coach required, in fact, from day one was to wear a heart rate monitor. So in all the Ironman training I did up to then, I did not wear one. I think I tracked my times and things like that, but I wasn't wearing a heart rate monitor. But
your heart could have just exploded and you wouldn't even known it.
That's right. So every time I would upload my workout for the day, like he could look at my heart rate. So like if he required, a hard run with, X amount of fartleks or speed work or even speed work in the pool or on the bike, like he could see by my heart rate, like, did I do it or not do it? Or did I just get out there and go for a cruise, or did I actually put in the hard work? But I love that sense of accountability. And I remember on more than one occasion, I kind of half-assed it. Like I was kind of lazy and I did try to do the speed work, but I don't want to get into heart rate stuff, but I didn't get into zone 4 or zone 5. Maybe I was in zone 2 and I kind of peaked a little bit into zone 3 a little bit where I, again, wasn't doing like a zone 5 effort or a zone 4 effort like he wanted. But I remember him criticizing me for it. And, but again, I'm having to sort of eat humble pie and take it and understand that he is there to make me better.
That's right.
And the sooner you can realize that from your coach, that he or she is there to help level you up, the better off you're going to be. So you've got to be receptive, particularly to constructive criticism. We don't want to get into all the different ways that you can coach or manage or lead others. I mean, obviously there's healthier ways of doing it, but hopefully you are working with a guy or a gal that at least has a healthy way with providing feedback. But just understand that usually that constructive criticism, if done correctly, is there to make you better.
Yeah, and we're obviously in this podcast episode talking about how to make you like more coachable, right? We're not going over like specific ways coaches might not do this correctly, right?
We're just assuming you have a good coach.
Exactly. Honestly, if you feel like you're just getting knocked down, beat down, never praised, or any like constructive, like that's something else entirely that maybe it's another episode that we can go over.
Yeah.
Also, I want to say before we get to our final point here too, is we're talking about this being a coachable hockey player. I would hope most coaches that make it to the level of coaching are, doing all these themselves as well, because I don't feel like you can become a coach unless you are receptive to criticism. You do take ownership, you embrace a growth mindset, and you listen more than you speak.
Oh yeah. Cause unfortunately there are a lot of coaches that don't have this sort of technique or approach where, I've met coaches that have a fixed mindset. I've met coaches that aren't receptive or aren't even great speakers or listeners it goes both ways here.
So I want to make sure that people, when you're listening to this episode, you don't think that it's specifically, are you a coachable player? But it's really, maybe we should have been more like, are you coachable ? Yeah. Because as a coach, you still need to be coachable as a coach.
That's a very good point.
Because like I've always said, and throughout most of my adult life, is you should never be like done learning. You should always be open to learning more. You should never think that you can't continue to grow. So like, just a little word for our coaches out there too. You're probably already thinking this, but just, this goes for you as well, to be receptive to criticism, because you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it from your players. You're going to hear it from your general manager. You're going to hear it from whoever you answer to, right? Or just, media. I mean, criticism is going to come in, and you got to be open to it, because sometimes it's going to be good stuff that's going to help you grow. So yeah, I just want to make sure I mention that. And in mentioning that, same thing for coaches or players, goes to our last point, maximum effort.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of Deadpool.
Well, that's really on point with the, I think the movie comes out this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So hockey requires 100% every single practice and every single game. Actually, I think about there's a Simpsons episode where the coach is trying to like really coax the kids into like, really getting them like up for a game. And they're like, I think it's baseball, I believe, or no, it's football. And he's just like, getting them like, we're going to win. We're going to win. We're going to this. And he goes, we're going to give 110%. And then the kids respond with, we can't give 110% because 100% is, anyway, it's a funny Simpsons episode, old school. But hockey requires 100% effort every single practice, every single game. So every play, shot, every effort you make, full commitment. So that starts, like we've talked before, one of our first episodes, that does not start when you hit the ice, right? That starts before that. You have to be ready day of the game, days before, weeks before, practices, scrimmages, open ice practices, anything like that, training room and mental room as well, right? You want to make sure that you are giving every bit of your effort in there. And we've talked about this before. When you do that, your coaches do take notice of that.
Yeah. I remember going to a Sean Walker camp, hockey camp this summer. I train hockey guy. And I was at the camp, and he was doing a session on deking. And he was like, okay, so when you're, you got to do this, this, and this. Okay, when you get to the defenseman and you want to deke them, you deke, and you need to continue skating. He's like, and the analogy he gave is like, okay, so if you do all this effort and you go into the bank and you rob the bank, would you just stop? No, right? You have to continue exiting the building. And he said a lot of hockey players, what they do is they're approaching the defenseman, they do this fancy stuff, they deke them, and then they just slow down. They stop. they're now gliding. They're not actually striding, out of there. But it's that lack of effort, right? It's not maximum effort. It's at that point, it's only 75% to get past the defenseman, and then you slow down, you glide, you're not fully embracing your strides. And if you take that simple illustration, it applies to everything. I mean, every play that you make, you've got to, finish with a strong shot. I know my coach makes fun of me all the time. Like, we'll do drills, and I'm going along the boards, and I have to skate around some cones, and then I'm already winded. By the time I get to shoot on goal, like, my shot is incredibly weak. And so it's like, well, why didn't I just have that 100% effort all the way through to complete the entire drill? So not only in how you play, but even, again, you can get into mindset issues. Like, I don't want to like sort of belabor that, but hopefully you're getting the main idea. It's 100% effort in every capacity of the game, what you're doing on the ice, off the ice, in preparation, your pregame rituals, even your postgame rituals, like everything, you've got to be fully invested in what you're doing. And that is what makes you a more coachable player.
Yeah, so this hits home for me very much, because even when I played tennis back in the day, through like my school years and then switching over to all my time playing hockey, I never consider myself the most talented player by far on the court or the ice rink, but you can bet I'm going to give my maximum effort every single time I'm out there, because one thing I think is important is that, and I'm aware of this all the time, we play 11:15 p.m. Nights on weeknights for our league. We don't have people in the stands watching, but my teammates are watching me. The other team's watching me, right? I can't stand. I don't want anyone to ever watch me play a game and think, "Wow, he's just coasting." I think that is one of my like biggest fears out there. So, for me, maximum effort is the only way to go. And it's kind of funny. I think our game we had last week, you and me personally, I still went maximum effort, but I didn't feel like I could give my maximum effort because it had been 3 weeks since I'd played, just due to illness and traveling and all that. But it felt off, and I hated it. So I'm excited to get back out there this week, because I've been able to get back into my training regimen, and get my stamina back. So I'm excited to get back out there, but if I can't give maximum effort, it makes me sick.
Yeah.
So this is very, very important one for me.
Yeah, it's and then we were just talking about the Enneagram, which we could save that for another conversation. But I know a big part of my Enneagram profile or whatnot is competition. I know even with StrengthsFinder, competition is actually my number one thing. So I like to compete. So kind of in that same vein, like I love doing the maximum effort. I love putting myself out there. Again, we're not patting ourselves on the back. We're just letting you know that, but it's an important trait. Like, again, if you want to create a good rapport with your leadership, with your coaches, etc., it's definitely something that you need to embrace.
Yeah. And, I'll take a second here since we're on this topic, and let's speak to the beer league players that are out there, right? We don't have coaches behind the bench. If you're a beer league team and you have a coach behind the bench, I don't know. I'll leave it at that. But majority of us teams out there, we don't have a coach behind the bench. We're a bunch of adults that are just playing recreational, right?
Yeah.
If you take these 5 points and you put them to your game, even as an adult playing recreational hockey, if you listen more than you speak, if you embrace a growth mindset, take ownership of your game, be receptive to criticism, and give your maximum effort every night, you are going to be the best teammate that your teammates will want to play with.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be such a huge asset. I could think of people on our team that are lacking in some of these areas. And if they could just turn the knob a little bit more, it would do wonders for our team.
And you'll see the players that do this more often are the players that get to sub for more teams, right? Because they're more fun to have in the locker room. They're more fun to be on the bench. Just because you know what you can expect from them, every single week that they come and play for your team. So, so I think this is great because a lot of times we talk about our recreational hockey, but we're more talking to like, maybe those that are like kind of gunning for, competition or competitive hockey at a higher level.
Yeah.
It's great to give some love to our, rec players out there that this stuff can carry you a long way at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I believe that is officially a wrap. So those are the 5 sort of concepts, traits, things that we wanted to cover. Again, just a quick recap. If you want to be a more coachable hockey player, embrace a growth mindset, take ownership, be receptive to criticism, and pursue should I mention listen more? Yeah. Listen more and then pursue maximum effort. So those are the things that we wanted to share with you guys today. If you want to continue to obviously level up your game, we'd love for you to download our mental toughness awareness guide. You can download this at gritbase.com/mental toughness. This is going to help you become more confident and hopefully become a more fearless hockey player moving forward. We're also very active on Instagram and all other social channels. In fact, we've been sort of revamping our efforts on YouTube. If you want to check us out, you can simply go to or search at Gritbase Hockey, and you can pretty much follow us on any platform of your choice. So again, we're active across the board. So with that said, we hope you guys have a great week, and we'll catch you next Tuesday.
You have been listening to the Hockey Combat Mindset Podcast with Scott Schwertly and Dale Dameron. New episodes release every Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating, provide a review, or make a topic recommendation for a future episode. Thanks again for tuning in, and join us next week for another episode.